Hello, it's Thursday, June 15th, 2017. You are listening to Inception Radio Network, voice of the fringe majority. This is Carol Carl with ufo-headline news. For everybody in the northern hemisphere, at least, it's springtime. Not officially summer, but warmer weather is here. And if you're inclined to recline on, say a lawn chair, well, here's something amazing you can see in the sky tonight. You can look for the ringed planet Saturn. It's going to be visible from dusk until dawn, because today our planet Earth flies between Saturn and the Sun, bringing Saturn into what observers call an opposition. That's the astronomical term. In other words, Saturn is opposite the Sun in Earth's sky right now. This is a big milestone for our year of observing the ringed planet. We go between Saturn and the Sun June 15th at 10 o'clock UTC. That translates into a lot of different times in different time zones. There'll be a chart later you can consult at ufo-headline-news.com, or if you just can't wait, we know it's got to be available someplace on the internet. So this is Saturn's special day. It's yearly opposition when Saturn is opposite the Sun in our sky. As a consequence, Saturn rises in the east at sunset, climbs highest up for the night at midnight, and sets in the west at sunrise. It's visible all night long, closest and brightest for this entire year. Although Saturn comes closest to the Earth on the same date that it reaches opposition, the ringed planet doesn't come as close as it looks on the diagram, so mark that. At present, Saturn lies some 10 times the Earth's distance from the Sun, 9 times the Earth-Sun distance from Earth. Astronomers, by the way, refer to that Earth-Sun distance as an astronomical unit, or just AU. And don't assume this is a one-night-only event. Saturn's opposition guarantees the ringed planet will be in good view throughout June, July, and August this year. You can recognize Saturn because it's in your southeast sky at dusk and nightfall, and it's close to the star Antares, that brightest star in the constellation Scorpius the Scorpion. You can distinguish golden Saturn from ruddy Antares just by color, either with the unaided eye or binoculars. And the folks at earthsky.org who authored this article want to remind us that Saturn tends to shine with a steadier light, whereas Antares is rather sparkly. Saturn will remain a fixture in the evening sky until November this year. All the while, golden Saturn shines in close vicinity, remember, of ruddy Antares, that brightest star in the Scorpius the Scorpion constellation. So let's go back for just a second to that thing called opposition. Well, it seems that our fast movement in orbit brings Earth between Saturn and the Sun every year, or more precisely, about 2 weeks later every year. 2 years ago, for instance, Saturn's opposition happened May 23rd. Last year, it was June 3rd. And this year, opposition happens today, June 15th. Next year, 2018, it's going to be June 27th. Put a save the date on your calendar. If you recognize this golden world tonight or later this month, you'll also enjoy it throughout the northern hemisphere summer, or winter if you're in the southern hemisphere. If you had a bird's-eye view of the solar system today, you'd see our planet Earth passing between the Sun and Saturn. You'd see the Sun, Earth, and Saturn lining up in space. But not for long, because Earth moves in orbit at 18 miles, 29 kilometers per second, in contrast to about 6 miles, 9 kilometers per second for Saturn. So soon, we're going to be pulling ahead of Saturn in that race of the planets. The inner planets, Mercury and Venus, can never be at opposition because they orbit the Sun inside Earth's orbit. Only the planets that orbit the Sun beyond Earth's orbit, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, can ever reach opposition, that is, appear opposite the Sun in our sky. All the planets farther from the Sun reach opposition every time our swifter-moving planet sweeps between the Sun and what's called superior planets. In other words, all the planets that orbit the Sun outside of Earth's orbit. Mars is going to return to opposition every other year. Jupiter's opposition happens 1 month later each year, and Saturn's opposition occurs 2 weeks later yearly. And this is the part where we have to offer, we will never spring any pop quizzes, no tests of any kind here at Inception Radio Network, UFO Headline News. We just want to tell you the facts. And this is a pertinent fact. The farther that a planet resides from the sun, the shorter the period of time between those successive oppositions. Saturn, going into that opposition mode tonight, is the 6th planet outward from the sun. It's the most distant world that's easily visible to the unaided eye. Telescopes reveal the rings, and that happened in the 17th century. Spacecraft in the 20th century revealed that what we thought of as 3 rings around Saturn to be thousands of thin, finely detailed rings. Those rings are made of tiny chunks of ice. Saturn also has 62 moons with confirmed orbits. But only 53 of those moons have names. Only 13 have diameters larger than 50 kilometers, about 30 miles. Saturn is truly a wondrous world of rings and moons. It seems to be everybody's favorite thing to gaze at through a small telescope. EarthSky.org suggests you check out and see if there's a public astronomy night near you this month, and they say, go. And this is where we're going to go for the bottom line. Look for Saturn at opposition tonight, June 15th, 2017. It will be shining in the east this evening, fairly close to the bright star Antares. And if you can't see it tonight, no problem. Saturn's going to be in excellent position to be observed all throughout June, July, and August. Buckle up for this. It's pretty extraordinary. It's written by Mike Wall for Space.com. He's their senior writer. Headline, Sun likely has a long-lost twin. Nemesis is apparently real, even if its bad reputation is undeserved. For decades, some scientists have speculated that the Sun has a companion whose gravitational tug periodically jostles comets out of their normal orbits and sends them careening towards Earth. The resulting impacts have caused mass extinctions, the thinking goes, which explains this putative star's nickname Nemesis. Now, a new study reports that almost all Sun-like stars are likely born with companions, and that bolsters the case for the existence of Nemesis. Here's a quote from Stephen Stoller. He's a research astronomer at the University of California, Berkeley. Quote, "We are saying, yes, there probably was a Nemesis, uppercase N, a long time ago," end quotes. But the new results don't paint Nemesis as a murderer. It seems likely that the sibling star probably broke free of the Sun and melted into the Milky Way's galaxy stellar population billions of years ago. Multi-star systems such as Alpha Centauri, for instance, the Sun's nearest neighbor, which harbors 3 stars, are common throughout the Milky Way. Indeed, recent computer simulation research suggests that most, if not all, stars are born with companions. This new study put that supposition to the observational test. Stephen Stoller and lead author Sarah Satovoy of the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory studied the Perseus molecular cloud. That's a large star-forming region about 600 light-years from Earth. Radio observations of the Perseus cloud by the Very Large Array in New Mexico and the James Clerk Maxwell Telescope in Hawaii revealed 55 young stars in 24 multi-star systems, much of which were binary, as well as 45 single-star systems. Said Stoller, quote, "The key here is that no one looked before in a systematic way at the relation of real young stars to the clouds that spawn them," end quotes. Satovoy and Stoller found that all of the observed wide binary systems, the ones with stars separated by at least 500 AUs, were very young. Older binary systems were more compact. And as we mentioned in the previous story, 1 AU, or astronomical unit, is the average Earth-Sun distance. It's about 93 million miles, 150 million kilometers. The 2 researchers, then, did some modeling work so they could better understand what they were seeing. Quote, "We ran a series of statistical models to see if we could account for the relative populations of young single stars and binary stars of all separations in that Perseus molecular cloud. And the only model that could reproduce the data was one in which all stars form initially as wide binaries. Then these systems either shrink or break apart within 1 million years," end quotes. In fact, the majority of newborn binary stars, almost 60%, end up going their separate ways, the duo determined. This is probably the fate of Nemesis and the Sun, which is suggested by this new study. That paper's been accepted, by the way, for publication in the esteemed journal Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society. But if you just can't wait, you can read it at the online preprint site, which is that unpronounceable name arxiv.org. Here's a rather striking headline. The credit for this is India Ashok of the International Business Times. Alien life could be discovered within the next decade, says astronomer. The hunt for alien life has long been of interest to numerous astronomers and space enthusiasts. Current space missions involve searching for habitable planets, with the hope of also stumbling onto microbial forms of life. Although we're yet to find any substantial evidence to point toward the existence of intelligent life beyond Earth, some experts still believe we could be closer to discovering alien life than we might think. According to Chris Impey, deputy head of the Department of Astronomy at the University of Arizona, the search for life beyond Earth may yield results within the next decade. However, Chris Impey cautioned that finding intelligent life could take much longer than that. Quote, I put my money on detecting microbial life in 10 to 15 years, but not at all detecting intelligent life, end quotes. Although this particular astronomer is skeptical about the search for intelligent life beyond Earth yielding results anytime soon, he indicated that such life forms may be in existence within our very own solar system. He also suggested that Europa, one of Jupiter's water-rich moons, could potentially hold life. Chris Impey added he hasn't ruled out the possibility of life still existing on Mars, although he believes that such life forms may likely exist below the surface, and as a result might be much harder to detect. He thinks scientists currently have a better shot at discovering evidence of life that used to exist on the red planet. Quote, if we actually get Mars rocks back here to Earth from a place that we think could have been habitable in the past, we might find that evidence of prior life, end quotes. According to Impey, in the coming years, thanks to technological advancements, scientists will be able to use NASA's new James Webb Space Telescope that comes online in 2018, and that's going to help detect biomarkers, such as oxygen and methane, in the atmospheres of Earth-like planets, which in turn might further the search for life beyond Earth. Impey adds, quote, the biomarker experiment could find evidence of microbial life indirectly, adding that the research could also help scientists locate planets that are closest to Earth as possible, not in distance, but in character. Although we could be still several decades away from discovering the existence of intelligent alien life, the possibility of finding microbial life on Mars, Europa, or the many exoplanets recently discovered in the TRAPPIST-1 series could help scientists determine how life forms survive in faraway places and different atmospheres. And this, in turn, can further our search for life beyond Earth and eventually even help humanity become a multiplanetary species. Regardless of how close we are to discovering life outside Earth, the hunt for extraterrestrial life is likely to continue despite failures. Quote, the first SETI experiment was back in 1959, so obviously it's been going on for over half a century without any real success. The people who do it, though, don't seem put off by failure, end quotes, Impey added. We say huzzah for the persistence of vision in this arena. Chris Impey, the astronomer, added that technological advancements have ensured that we now have a better chance of detecting extraterrestrial life. Quote, every new SETI experiment done now is about as good as the sum of all previous SETI experiments put together, end quotes. And SETI, of course, is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, all uppercase SETI. Hey, NASA's jumping on the recycle bandwagon. Cool. Here's an article from newscientist.com. Headline, NASA revives 50-year-old idea to recycle space stations in orbit. Leah Crane gets the byline here. The long-dormant plan for a space station built in space from recycled parts may be getting new legs. NASA has signed an estimated $10 million contract to study the possibility of turning used rocket stages into functioning labs with support for crew. Before Skylab, which was the first United States space station, went into orbit in the 1970s, Wernher von Braun proposed to separately send parts for a space station and astronauts aboard two Saturn IB rockets. They'd launch within a day of one another. Launching separate payloads would be key to saving weight, given the rocket's capacity limitations. When both rockets were in orbit, then, astronauts would remotely vent any remaining fuel from the crewless rocket's hydrogen tank, install life-supporting equipment, and move in. This would reuse the fuel tank that would otherwise just be discarded. Although von Braun's idea was eventually abandoned in favor of launching Skylab fully equipped, the cost-saving benefits of this low Earth orbit maneuver have once again become attractive. So, a group of 3 United States companies, NanoRacks, United Launch Alliance, and Space Systems Loral, that's spelled L-O-R-A-L, has now been contracted to examine whether building a recycled space station will work, amid a push from other private space companies for reusable rockets. United Launch Alliance will provide the used second stages of Atlas V rockets, for which NanoRacks will prefabricate a lab and living space, with robotic outfitting from Space Systems Loral. As with the previous plan, the idea is to use 2 rockets, with the astronauts assembling the lab equipment in space once that fuel tank is used. Quote, "This innovative approach offers a pathway that's more affordable. It involves less risk than fabricating modules on the ground and subsequently launching those into orbit," end quotes. That's from the founder of NanoRacks, CEO member Jeff Manber. The upper stages of Atlas V rockets are currently discarded after a single use, so turning them into mini space stations could be free money in the bank. Although the financial risks are lower, but here's the sticky point, the human ones may not be. Turning spent shells into environments capable of supporting both astronauts and experiments will be a challenge, as well asking astronauts to retrofit them for life and use while in orbit. But if NanoRacks and its partners can manage this, then reviving Wernher von Braun's concept could significantly lower costs for space stations, either in orbit or further into deep space. And since we're talking about making things habitable for astronauts, let's just segue into this. IKEA partners with NASA to make space a little more cozy. We grabbed this story from the NewYorkPost.com. Setting up IKEA furniture might be difficult, but it's not rocket science. Or is it? Thanks to a new collaboration between NASA and that Swedish furniture store, the two challenges may not be so different after all. IKEA is now, quote, looking into how a Mars habitat can become more like home, end quotes, so that one day, if we do leave this planet, we'll be able to set up cheap, mass-produced furniture on New Horizons, too. In order to determine how best to create that Mars-ready home, an IKEA team is spending 3 days at the MDRS habitat in Utah. The company describes that as, quote, a confined spacecraft-like environment that simulates the experience of outer space, end quotes. This is no joke. NASA's own astronauts spend up to 3 years in this habitat in order to ready themselves for space travel. Quote, it's a crazy, fun experience, end quotes. And that's from IKEA creative leader Michael Nikolic. He continues, quote, we're basically completely isolated for 3 days to get a taste of what astronauts go through for 3 years. It's almost like that misery you feel when you're out camping, end quotes. But the hope is that it doesn't always have to be so miserable. It's unclear exactly what will come out of this collaboration, but IKEA says it's, quote, curious to find out how this newfound space knowledge might be relevant to urban life in megacities, where small space living, air, and water pollution is the norm, end quotes. So it may not even be that IKEA is making furniture for us to use on Mars. Rather, they're attempting to use lessons gleaned from being an astronaut, or at least living like one, to improve the furniture that we already have here on Earth. Said Nikolic, quote, I think that the essence of this collection will be about appreciating what we have on Earth, human beings, plants, clean water and air, but also diversity and that sense of belonging, things that we take for granted on a daily basis. After this journey, It's going to probably feel pretty awesome to come home to my own bed, end quotes. We're going to bet that's an IKEA bed. Speaking of bed and dreams, well, next up is a headline that is surely nightmare fodder. It's from digitaltrends.com. A headline, Space Oddity. Flatworm sent into orbit returns to Earth with an extra head. And if you want to see more, well, you can check out a photograph of said flatworm in all its slimy glory later at ufo-headline-news.com. 2.5 years ago, it seems, scientists sent a handful of flatworms to the International Space Station to study how these simple invertebrates handle space environments. They weren't overly concerned with the worms' well-being. Their end goal was to investigate how space will impact future human astronauts. Said Michael Levin, a Tufts University biologist working on the project, quote, "We were interested to explore the effects of space travel, including loss of the geomagnetic and gravitational field, and the regeneration of complex organs," end quotes. Specifically, the researchers wanted to explore, quote, exomedicine, end quotes. That's medicine in zero gravity. We're predicting that's a term we're going to be hearing a lot more of in the future, gentle listeners. Planarian flatworms are well known for their regenerative abilities, and they're often used in medical research. In this particular study, the scientists amputated one set of the spacebound planaria, left the other set intact. Then they packed them in separate test tubes half filled with water and launched them into space aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. And here's what happened. Once the specimens returned from orbit, researchers realized space can do freaky things to flatworms. One unusual finding was the intact flatworms underwent spontaneous fission, meaning it split itself into two identical bodies, and the control flatworms didn't. The space-traveling worms also responded to light and temperature significantly differently than their Earth-bound counterparts. But, strangest of all, one of the amputated flatworms returned to Earth with that extra head. None of the teams at Tufts had ever witnessed spontaneous regeneration of a second head, and they'd worked with 15,000 control worms in the past 5 years alone. These events didn't happen by chance either, according to Levin. Quote, "It was definitely caused by the overall process of space travel, although we can't yet say whether it was specifically the zero gravity, the zero geomagnetic field, or the vibrations and stress of liftoff and landing that caused this," end quotes. The researchers recognized there were limitations imposed by sample size and the difficulty in recreating certain space stresses, such as temperature. However, Levin and his team's big takeaway? Space can affect organisms in really interesting ways, and that it's important for us to understand these impacts before we start launching humans on long-haul missions. Said Levin, quote, "It's clear that researching how space travel affects complex biological systems is interesting, not only in terms of exomedicine, but also for understanding basic aspects of living systems here on Earth," end quotes. A paper detailing this study will be published this week in the very appropriately named journal Regeneration. So how about some UFOs? Well, from the Irish Sun, with a byline for Elf Finnerman, here's a headline, "Bizarre UFO picture in broad daylight in skies above County Leitrim as expert explains why area has become sighting hotspot." The truth is out there, in the skies above Leitrim. It seems an eagle-eyed observer has captured an eerie snapshot of an unidentified flying object on May 7th. And before you dismiss this as a picture of the moon at night, this image was taken in broad daylight. This bizarre sighting has now been recorded at Feiler's Research Institute. It's a United States-based national UFO center. The unnamed witness described seeing, quote, "the small glow above my garden," end quotes, before quickly reaching for a camera, adding, quote, "There was no movement or sound. I turned to call my wife, and it was gone." This was 2:15 p.m. It was very weird, and I was a tad spooked, in truth. The purple haze that you see in the photograph wasn't visible to the eye. I'm confused, in truth, end quotes. So, have aliens heard about the beauty of lovely Lightrum and its rock-bottom house prices, or is it simply a trick of the light? Whatever the explanation, it's yet another unusual sighting in an area which has become known as a hotspot for suspected paranormal activity of all sorts. Skeptics may dismiss this as a hobby for the tinfoil hat brigade, but the northwest of the country is the focus of major scientific research, thanks to astronomer Eamon Ansbro of Kingsland Observatory in Boyle in Roscommon. Ansbro believes the latest sighting in Leitrim could be a plasma ball, which has previously been seen in parts of Boyle. He explained, quote, "There's a similar ball of light that's been seen in a place called Hessdalen in Norway." Yes, that's a great Google, gentle listeners, the Hessdalen Lights, Hessdalen, and that's in Norway. He continues, quote, "I know the people who operate there, and they have automated instrumentation that has recorded them, and we've had recordings here as well. It appears to be a new form of light in physics that we don't know about yet, so we're putting the physics to it to see what it's about," end quotes. Mr. Ansbro has already investigated more than 130 sightings around Ireland, many of which he believes can be explained by the presence of orbital tracks around the Earth. He says that Lough Key, that's spelled Lough, in Boyle, is one of those points where orbital tracks intersect, which could explain the unusually high level of these unexplained sightings in the area. He and his research colleagues even managed to work out a pattern of possible cycles of activity at these intersections and correctly predicted one such sighting. These strange occurrences have baffled the most skeptical people in the area. Mr. Ansbro recalls, quote, "We received a report 6 weeks ago from a guy in Boyle who was driving the N4 towards Sligo. He saw 2 balls of light about 50 meters in front of him, roughly the size of the moon at that distance, in other words, a few inches across. They were there for 30 seconds, then they winked out, and he saw them again to his right." He reported this to Mr. Ansbro and said that while he was completely skeptical, he has gone through all the options and he couldn't find an explanation for it. End quotes. End article. End broadcast. We've got to fly out of here because... That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Inception Radio Network. Follow today's broadcast at ufo-headline-news.com. Word for the day, loving kindness. Take care of each other. We're all in this together. This is Carol Carl. See you tomorrow.